Hello there. My name is George Hurst. In this program, we're going to show you how to make a top hat with a steampunk influence. The basis for our hat today will be taken from the aristocrat hat pattern, which is a top hat as part of the leather hat pattern pack that's available. We will begin by making tracings on tracing film from the pattern, as you can see that I have done here, and we will now use these to trace the pattern onto our leather. First thing we will do, we will dampen the area that we're going to trace on our leather. And then we will set it aside, or we will wait a few moments so that the water can penetrate. And notice I'm kind of fading the water out on the edges so that we don't get watermarks. To do this project, I am using a 4 to 5 ounce vegetable tan leather, and I'm going to start tracing now with a very important point, and that is there's a little notch right here on our pattern. This is a registration mark that's very, very important. You'll also notice that I have paper clipped my pattern to the leather on one side. This is so that I can lift it up from time to time without danger of it moving. So now I will very carefully trace my lines. It's very important that we trace these lines exactly. Check it from time to time. Now keep in mind, this being the brim that I'm tracing now, we will do 2 of these, and then they will be glued together. So it's very important that we trace and cut these out exactly as the pattern dictates. After we have traced completely around our circles, we will now need to very carefully mark each of the holes that we will use for lacing. Very important that we get these exactly the same. And we have all of our tracing done, so now we can proceed to the next step. Since this is a rather lightweight leather, I prefer to cut it with the shears rather than a knife. Either way is fine. In fact, I will probably cut the inner circle with a knife. For this inside cut, I'm very carefully now cutting that with the utility knife. It is also very important to cut that little nick that we talked about when we did our tracing. This is a registration mark that's very important. And now we will very carefully punch these holes using a 3/32 size punch. We're using that size because that's the lace we will use to fasten this to the upper part of the hat. Since we're going to glue the two pieces of the brim together for more accuracy rather than tracing it again from the tracing film, I'm going to use the first cutout we made. I'm going to turn it over and place it very carefully, and then I will use a scratch-awl to do my tracing. Now, I will very carefully hold this in place. I will use my scratch-awl to mark my little notch, and then we will trace around all of the lines that we traced before. We will go around the outside as well. With the awl, we will also carefully mark all of the holes. As I cut out my second part of the brim, I'm cutting the outside slightly oversized. And after we glue it together, then we will trim this. And now we will carefully cut the inner part of the circle with the sharp knife, making note that I have already cut my little V notch. As we did with the other part of the brim, we are now punching the same size holes in exactly the same position. I'm now going to trace the top portion of the hat, and as in the brim, there's a little notch that we need to trace there. It's very important for registering the parts. And as we did with the brim, we do it very carefully, and we make sure that we mark every hole in the exact location. Our parts are all now cut and punched, so it's time to begin the assembly process.